Hello, and welcome to Creating a Life You Love with Adriana, where we talk about all things mental, spiritual health, how to have healthy relationships, and how to create a healthy lifestyle centered on the Lord, whether you're single, going through a breakup, dating, engaged, married, in every single area of life, just how to, glorify God, grow closer to Him, and just become like the healthiest versions of ourselves all around. And speaking of that, I wanted to share some of the things I wish my younger self had known. That way, she would be able to have much healthier relationships, much healthier season of singleness, all the things. And the reason why this came to my mind was this morning I was playing the piano. And when I say playing the piano, I do not read music, I just know chords and kind of play by ear. But anyway, so I was playing the piano and I like to sing my song, my prayers to the Lord sometimes. So I'll just like make up things on the fly. Sometimes they go well, sometimes they don't, but it doesn't matter. It's just for me and the Lord, just to worship Him. And I find it also helps with my prayer life because sometimes when I'm just praying out loud or writing down my prayers, I like get very distracted easily. But if I'm playing the piano and singing, really hard to get distracted if you're doing both of those things? So anyway, I was praying to the Lord this morning and I started thinking about, all like my past regrets, past mistakes, and just things that I wish my younger self knew that could save her a lot of heartbreak, a lot of issues, a lot of grief. Uh, Obviously, I'm not defined by those mistakes anymore, the sins that I've committed in the past. Even when I was following the Lord, I was walking with the Lord, and I was still sinning because I just didn't understand fully. I'm forgiven by that. The Lord says, You are forgiven for anything you are going to do. He says in Psalm 103 that your sins are as far as the east is from the west. So He does not see you by your sin. Jesus paid the ultimate penalty, died on the cross, so that we could come to God blameless and holy, even though we've sinned, we've made mistakes. We can be made new. So anyway, I was thinking about that this morning, and I decided that I kind of wanted to share that because maybe you're on a similar, journey that I was a year and a half ago going through a breakup. Or maybe you are, just now single and you're wondering how to navigate that. Or maybe you just got in a relationship and you're like, what the heck is going on? I'm very confused. Um, there are a few things that I've learned that I feel like society may benefit from. Our generation as a whole, Gen Z specifically, maybe also millennials, but and I guess even younger too. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to talk about that today. So we're just gonna move right into this. And I wanted to start in the area of breakups and healing. There are so many things that I've learned, but if I could go back and tell my younger self a few things, number one would be no contact is 99% of the time the way to go, you know? When I went through my first breakup, we did not have no contact. I had the idea that we could still be friends, that we could still hang out, we could do Bible studies together. Horrible idea because this dragged on the breakup. It dragged on my feelings for this person. I would go back and forth between, oh, he didn't text me back, and oh, whatever, I don't need him, I don't care about him, and oh, he's missing my birthday. Like, what the heck? What's wrong? And we weren't dating. So it was like this, situationship, but we had broken up. So we weren't going to date and we weren't dating, but we were like in this kind of, you know what I mean? This seesaw of emotions. It's up and down, up and down. And so I was just struggling to get over this person because I didn't have a clean break. And maybe you're in a situation where, you see this person every day and you don't really know how to do no contact. I would say for that, if you work with this person, maybe you guys should find a new job. But if that's not plausible, that's okay. I think just setting those boundaries of like, I'm not going to text you every single day anymore. I'm not going to hang out with you outside of seeing you at work. Just having some space to heal is really important. And I know it's very difficult. It's kind of like ripping off a band-aid. If you break up, it's already really hard. But then if you have the cushion of, oh, well, I'm still going to talk to this person tomorrow, like they're my friend, it gets a little bit easier. But then when it doesn't get easier is when you're a year post breakup and you haven't gotten over this person and you want to start dating because you want to get married, but you can't get over this person because you keep talking to them and they're in your life. That's why I'd say no contact is better. It just gives space, clarity, emotional protection. Um, you may not know if you're ever going to get back together with this person. And I think something that people have asked me is like, okay, well, if I do no contact, how do I know when the right time to reach out is? This is different for every single circumstance. And I've helped people through this and, um, given them advice depending on the circumstance. But I'd say for the most part, to have a clean break is important with no date in mind of seeing each other again. I think just embracing singleness and then having the idea that when it's the right time to reach out to this person, if it is at all, you will feel that and you will know. And you have to be very careful to distinguish between, your emotions and then what is actually right and what the Lord, is nudging you to do. For Christopher and I, my now husband, which if you don't know the story, we went from breaking up to getting married. We went no contact. I was very grateful for that because it was very different from my first breakup and with someone else. And what Christopher said was, I don't think we should have any contact. Originally, I said, let's meet up in 2 months and see how things are going. And then he said, you know what? We need time to heal. And I feel like holding on to this date of like seeing you in 2 months is just going to be too hard because now you're having these thoughts of, well, what if they found someone else? Or if you broke up because someone had to work on some things, if they know that they're going to see you in 2 months, they could make these temporary changes that seem really promising. But then when you get to back together in 2 months, you realize that it was just all a facade. There was no like lasting change. And it's because they knew they were going to see you again. So they made these like minor fixes to try to show that they're better. They could even be doing this subconsciously, like trick themselves into thinking that they were perfectly fine to start dating again because they had this like, oh, I'll see you in 2 months in their mind. Anyway, so I think for the most part, not having like a date to reconnect is wise. But again, this is very like it really depends on the circumstance. I can just give you my example. And yeah, I think spending time with the Lord and focusing on your singleness, which I'll get into this later, is really important instead of focusing on a specific answer for should I get back together with this person. Another thing I wish I would have known is that breakups are not the worst thing in the world. Now, I know it feels like it. I couldn't eat for like a week, didn't want to work out, didn't want to do anything. I was so just sad. And this happened, I went through 2 breakups in my life and this happened with both of them. And I realized, more so in the second breakup with my now husband, that this breakup was the best thing that ever happened to me because it stripped me away from all the things that I thought I needed in life. My first breakup was good for pushing me towards God, but my second breakup was good for me surrendering everything to God. I realized that I was putting too much, importance in my appearance, too much importance in working out and looking a certain way. And I realized that, I was damaging my body by the way I was working out. All of these things were just like coming to my mind. And it was because I was in so much pain that I could suddenly like see things clearly. Maybe that doesn't make any sense, but I guess what I'm trying to say is when you remove all like the fluff from your life, all like the distractions, you can suddenly see everything for how it is. And I feel like the Lord was really gracious in showing me, like, this is why you went through the breakup. Because I want you to be closer with me. I want you to let go of these things, let go of the need for validation. So just reminding yourself when you're going through a breakup, even if this breakup is with a really amazing guy, you thought you were going to marry him, just reminding yourself, like, this is not the end. You don't know how the story is going to go. You don't know if you're going to get back together. You don't know if you'll find someone else. And it gets better, something that I really held on to during my breakup was Romans 8:28, where it says the Lord will work all things together for good for those who love him. I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but it was just really helpful in knowing like the Lord will work this together for good. And it might not always be good to us. Like, it might not look good on the outside, but in the end, it will be. And I think that was just a really important reminder. Also reminding myself that like the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. It says that somewhere in the Psalms, was it Psalm 39? I don't really know, but it says the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And like just knowing that, I truly feel that when you go through deep suffering, the loss of someone in your life or pain, of course there are people who shut out God and you can do that as well. But I feel like when you go through pain in life, it brings you closer to God because suddenly you aren't worried about maybe how you look. You're not worried about, if a glass breaks on the ground, you're like, oh, well, nothing could be worse for how I'm feeling right now. So, like, I don't care. Like, you don't react the same way you did. I mean, maybe you do. But for me, I just noticed that when I was going through deep pain, like, nothing mattered but the Lord. And it brought me so much closer to Him. Um, when it comes to, after your breakup, when you're now in this singleness season, I think something that I did very poorly in my first breakup was I didn't seek out other relationships. I didn't call it seeking out other relationships, but I sought attention from guys. I welcomed it. And, if a guy asked for my number, I was like, oh, well, it couldn't hurt to go hang out with him. And it was kind of me like sliding into these situationships without me fully realizing that I still hadn't processed the last breakup. So here I was, still talking to my ex, and then welcoming other guys that I thought were just going to be friends into my life. But the thing that caused was more emotional connection. So I would have emotional connection to this guy because we were talking about our stories and I was telling them about, how I was feeling about this breakup and I was just creating all these bonds with all these men that I was naive to think I was just being friends with them. And looking back, I was seeking validation from guys. Now, during this time, I was reading my Bible, I was praying, I was going to church, but I didn't see, like, I was very disconnected from this. And so when you're going through your singleness, focus on your singleness until you know it is time to start dating. And you might not know for sure, but when you're still hurting. Like, if you are still aching at the thought of like your breakup and still hurting, you are not ready to be with someone else. Now, there's definitely stories where like within a few months of, someone breaking up with someone else gets married. Like I know a few influencers that have podcasts and they've talked about that. I'm not getting married, sorry. They break up with someone and then they meet someone else a few months later. So I'm not saying it can never work, but for the most part, you do need time to process the end of a relationship. I think that's really important. And having like a conscious decision of like, okay, now I'm ready to date, instead of what I did, which was still talking to my ex, thinking that, oh, well, like I might as well see what else is, I might as well like hang out with guys and be friends with them and, make more friends, build my social network, right? And so I started doing that, but it just wasn't wise. And I'll go into more why it wasn't wise and my downfalls in having guys as friends. And I'm using quotation marks because I think they were a little bit more than friends. It just wasn't a good idea. Yeah. So when you're single, focus on your singleness. I know it's going to be hard. You might want to seek out validation because when you get broken up with, or even if you break up with someone, it almost feels like a form of rejection. Um, Even if it's a mutual decision, it is kind of a form of rejection. Like, oh, I don't want to be with you, but you don't want to be with me either. Like, that's not cool. That's how I felt during my relationship with Christopher because he broke up with me. And then I also agreed, but I was like hurt because I still felt rejected. And another thing on that, when I'm talking about like take your singleness seriously, you want to make sure that you are drawing closer to the Lord, not distracting yourself. I think something that I did in my first relationship was I really coped in unhealthy ways with my breakup. I think bringing the Lord into that is really important. So I guess I did kind of realize that, but I wish I could go back and tell my younger self still for the first time, avoid coping in unhealthy ways. Bring it to the Lord, bring it to friends, talk to a therapist. When it comes to maybe you start dating someone. Now, another thing that I wish I could tell myself, and I actually just talked about this in the last podcast episode, is stop seeking for answers 24/7 when you're going through a breakup. When you're going through a breakup, the last thing, like, you don't need to know right away, are you going to be with this person again? After you go through a breakup, you already know, okay, I'm not going to start dating right now. So there is no real point to know if you're going to get back together with that person. All that matters now is taking it day by day, processing the relationship, bringing it to the Lord, maybe having a counselor to help you work through it, talk through it with friends. That's all that matters. And at first, when Christopher and I went through the breakup, I was just asking the Lord every day, like, will we get back together? Please tell me. I want to know. And obviously, as humans, like, we want to know what's going to happen. We want to know the plan. We want God to tell us. But something that I was talking about more at length in my last episode was we need to stop seeking answers more than we're seeking God's presence. So, seeking answers made it feel like where I was just like waiting for the Lord to tell me do this, do that. And I was like a robot, just like obeying these commands instead of me saying, like, I want to spend time with you, Lord, because I want to feel peace. I want to spend time with you, Lord, because I just like being in your presence. I like doing nothing and just sitting in silence and like taking it all in. And so I feel like that's something that I, at the beginning, struggled with. As time went on, I got a little bit better, but still, I would seek answers more than I was seeking to be in God's presence. And it was a constant battle. And so, what I would suggest for you, if you just went through a breakup, even if it's been a few months, just focus on taking each day at a time. Right now, you are single. Right now, you are not in a relationship with anyone. And you can pray and ask the Lord, like, please reveal this to me. Maybe it's been quite a few months and you really don't know. But I think the most important thing is, what are you doing to grow as a person? What are you doing to prepare yourself to be a wife or a husband? Do those things. And when you do those things, the answers will follow. So seek the Lord, not because you want an answer, but because you want to grow as a person. You want to, you know, take on the calling that God put on your life. I think that's really important versus asking the Lord, do I text them? Do I not? Do I get back together with them? Do I not? I think those come as you spend time with the Lord. And yeah, I go more into that in my last podcast episode, but I would just really say that's important. Um, when you're going through a breakup, I think that you can certainly have memories of this person come up to your mind. And I think you can, if they're happy memories, maybe you had a good relationship with this person, it wasn't toxic. You can think of those happy memories, but I don't think we should dwell on them and wish that we could go back to the past. Just keep reminding yourself of, like, I am not there right now. Those memories served me at that time, but right now, I need to be present and I need to focus on what I'm doing. And you can, ask the Lord to help you with that. Like, say, hey, Lord, I'm really thinking about so and so. We had a lot of good memories. Maybe we'll have those memories again one day. Maybe I'll recreate those memories with someone else. But for right now, please help me to focus on what I can be doing now that I am single. Um, yeah, so that's another thing. Because obviously those memories are going to come, but just kind of redirect your thoughts to, like, what am I doing now? What am I currently doing, instead of thinking about marriage? It's so funny because, like, we spend our whole lives until we get married thinking about what it's going to be like to get married. Maybe you don't, but I did. And then you finally get married and you're like, well, what else is there to think about? So then your mind starts going to the past and then over analyzing every single thing, which is something that I have struggled with lately, or going to the future. Just depends where you are, and just depends. But, I'm not really thinking about having kids right now. So I'm not thinking about the future in that way. But anyway, and one more on singleness. I kind of touched on this earlier, but when I was spending time with guys as friends, I would meet them out and about because I wasn't on any dating apps. I would meet guys out and about, exchange numbers, and we'd go to the beach. We'd go to coffee. I never went on like these formal dates, but what ended up happening was I built these emotional connections with them really quickly. Now, in my mind, I just thought I was one of the guys, right? I was not, and it was just not healthy. And something that I wish I could tell myself was do not get emotionally connected by sharing the deepest details of your life the first or second or even third time you hang out with this guy. Like, do not do that. Again, I already told you, like, if you just went through a breakup, don't spend time with guys at all, really, like, alone. You need time to heal and not, start seeking someone else. But once you maybe start going on dates, be really careful about giving emotional details if you are not dating someone. And even when you start, if you are not in a relationship with someone, even when you do get in a relationship with someone, you still want to be careful of how much you share in the beginning, because what can happen is you might share some deep childhood trauma. Maybe they have something similar. And then you guys kind of trauma bond and you think you're connected because you are similar and you're equally yoked and all the things, but really you're connected because you shared your deepest trauma the first time hanging out. So I think you have to understand, like, even if you really do connect to this person and you feel like they're a safe space to tell them these things, you still need to protect yourself. Even if it's not about, oh, well, they're not going to share it with anyone. Like, I trust them. Even if it's not about that. Because in my mind, I was like, well, I can tell this stuff to anybody because I share it on a podcast. So it's fine. But what I didn't realize was that I was emotionally connecting myself to these guys. And I kind of mentioned this earlier of like, I was emotionally connected to so many guys and it was just confusing me. And that wasn't healthy. So wish I could go back and tell myself, if you're going to hang out with guys, whether you're going to the beach, coffee shop, grabbing a bite to eat, be careful with what you share. Start slow, start small. And even when you get into a relationship, I think there's a difference between like dating, like going on dates, and then being in a relationship with somebody. Even when you're in a relationship with somebody, though, you want to start slowly with sharing very intimate details about your life. I think that's something that you got to be mindful of. And so I wish I could tell myself that, but I can't. And that's okay. I lived and I learned. Now, I think I answered everything. There's going to be a part two on this. I'm going to split this up a little bit. So if you want to listen to the part two, go check that out next week. It'll be out next week. There was just kind of a bit that I wanted to talk about, and I didn't want it to be too overwhelming. So there's going to be two parts. But if you did enjoy this, if you related to this at all, if it was helpful, make sure to leave a comment if you had a question on this, if you wanted me to clarify something, and make sure you're subscribed so next week you can see the next episode, or if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you follow the podcast there as well. As always, I appreciate your support, and I just hope that anything I say here can be encouraging. Maybe it's the hard truth a little bit, and I'm definitely still learning along the way. I do not have this thing all perfect, but like I said, I was thinking this morning about there's a lot of things that I wish I could do differently. And obviously I can't, but what I can do is let you know the things that I would do differently so that you can, do it differently in your own life and not make the same mistakes that I did. I think it's just important to remind yourself and, myself that these mistakes that I made, they are forgiven. I have learned from them. I have moved on. And that's very comforting to know. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Go check out part two if it's not already out. You got to wait a few days. And I will talk to you next time on Creating a Life You Love with Adriana.